Okay, welcome to Pagan Happy Hour, everyone, and happy Friday. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. We have a very fun show in store. Today, we are going to be talking about household spirits, and specifically, we'll be looking at a few household spirits that are really connected to the Yule season. So, if you have ever been curious about household spirits, this is going to be the show for you. Before we jump into it, if you are new here, welcome. I do Pagan Happy Hour every Friday at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's a really great way for me to connect with you all, to go over a different topic of discussion. And I will be looking over at the chat as we go along because I'm going to be bringing in your thoughts and your ideas into the conversation as well. And if you do enjoy Pagan Happy Hour, there are a couple ways you can support the show. The first way is through my Patreon, which I have linked down below. If you decide to become a patron, you also get access to the Discord community, which is a really fun, vibrant community of fellow pagans and witches. So if you are looking for fellow people to talk about your spirituality, your ideas, your beliefs, it's a great place for that. And the other great way you can support the show is through Super Chats, which is the $ button at the bottom of the chat box. And through that, you can donate any amount, and I will see your question or comment pop up really big. So I'll be sure to bring your thoughts and your ideas into the chat. And I still have my Kickstarter running. There is only, I think, 15 or so days left. So if you are interested in getting a copy of my tarot deck, the Key Tarot, definitely check out my Kickstarter link down below. Now that we got that out of the way, I would love to hear from you all in the chat where you are watching from today and what you are drinking. So let me cue that drink music. Okay. So I'm having a little bubbly today, feeling a bit fancy, I guess. Let's see, checking your comments. I see people chiming in from South Carolina, from Indiana, from Ontario, Louisiana, Arkansas, Minnesota, England. Must be late there right now. Let's see, New Mexico, Brooklyn, Alaska, Texas, Virginia. Let's see, Maryland, Missouri, Oklahoma, Finland, and let's see, California. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope you have a beverage yourself, and we are going to be jumping into the chat. So let me have a sip, and we'll get started. Oh, and if you haven't heard yet, I am really excited because I recently put an offer on a house and it was accepted. So assuming everything goes well, I'll be closing mid-December and moving in January. And then I'm going to have some fun house tour stuff for you guys too eventually. So looking forward to that. Really excited. A lot of big things going on right now, which is wild. But let's jump into the topic. Let me turn off the music here. Okay. So we are going to be talking about household spirits. Now, you might not quite be familiar with the concept of household spirits, and there are both household deities and household spirits. So these are spiritual beings that are centered around the home. Now, firstly, let me briefly go over household deities. And household deities, you might be familiar with some of them. Usually, they are connected to the hearth. Because when we think historically, the fire, the hearth, was of course the heart of the home. It's what provided warmth for the people, it's what provided sustenance through cooking food. And even today, the hearth is still the heart of the home in a lot of ways, right? Now, there are several hearth deities, and most of them tend to be goddesses, which kind of makes sense because historically the home was more the sacred feminine space. And you've probably heard of Hestia is one, but also Frigg from the Norse pantheon. So there are many different deities, and almost every pagan culture has a hearth or a home goddess. And anytime that you're wanting to tap into that, the fireplace mantle is always a great place to leave a statue or leave an offering for a household deity. But we're probably not going to talk too much about household deities because I want to talk about the spirits, the household spirits, which are this second group of divine beings that are a little bit lesser in stature than the larger deities like Hestia and Frigg. So, household deities are something that is also common across cultures and across time periods. So, it's pretty universal, and you see a wide variety of different household deities. You can look at ancient Rome. For example, they had the Lares, which were a household deity that was also connected to the ancestors, and people would leave offerings for the Lares. But you have other pagan cultures where these household deities aren't necessarily ancestors, they're more kind of magical spirits that reside and help you in the home. Um, so, usually with these household spirits, originally their center point was still kind of also the hearth in a lot of ways. They would help clean the hearth or take care of the hearth. And I find it interesting that even in modern day times, how much we still are connected to that space in our homes. Like, for example, in Yule season or Christmas season, people often will put stockings by the fireplace. It's almost like a homage to the fact that that hearth was once the centerpiece of the magical and the spiritual place in the home. And people aren't necessarily conscious of that when they are hanging stockings in front of the fire, but that's really the same concept that we're tapping into. We're tapping into the magic of the hearth. So I think that's kind of neat that even today it's kind of still such a huge part of how we live our lives. And if you watch any of the numerous like Christmas decorating vlogs or whatever, they're always decorating the hearth, and that's a key place to celebrate the season. And that goes all the way back through different deities as well as these household spirits. So we'll talk a little bit more about household spirits specifically and how they're different from these deities. But let me take a sip of my drink here and check your comments. Of course, as I'm going along, feel free to ask questions or share your own thoughts when it comes to household spirits. Let's see. Let me check your questions and comments. Okay. Jay Elizabeth is mentioning that household spirits are very common in Finnish folklore. We will be talking about a Finnish Yule household spirit shortly. Let's see. Uh, awesome. Let's see. What else do we got here? Joey is asking, are brownies household spirits? Yes, they are, Joey. And that's a household spirit you're probably very familiar with if you have read or watched the movies of Harry Potter. Dobby is a brownie. And a brownie is a very particular type of household spirit that has the whole kind of connection with the clothes being bad. Like that goes all the way back to folklore. Um, so, household spirits in general, their role is really to take care of the home. So, whenever you are doing chores or whatever, and you see, like, oh, I don't remember washing this window, but it looks like it was just washed. Or I don't remember cleaning the hearth of the ash, but it looks like it was already cleaned. These are small little types of things that historically people would attribute to their household spirit, getting the work done, just this kind of little helper that helps you throughout these little chores that we all do in our homes. But great question. Um, Now, let me see. Now, these household spirits, they tend to not have as much power or magical abilities as connect with wider deities. And that's also true in Harry Potter, for example. You can tell J.K. Rowling did a little bit of folkloric research, where Dobby does have, magic, but is not as powerful as, the magician's magic. Oh, and we have our first super chat from Vocatus. Thank you so much. That says, lots of spirits out here on the farm, 50 acres of peace and quiet, having a right Russian here in rural Georgia. Thank you so much. And yeah, actually, household spirits, while they started in the home, they really expanded out into the farm. And this is a great segue to talk about something interesting that happened to household spirits over time. So, household spirits were considered important for the family. They would often leave little offerings of thank you to the household spirits. But as Christianity slowly took over in these rural communities, um, the household spirits, their role started to get smaller and smaller and smaller, where eventually they left the home and they were believed to then reside in places like attics or barns or saunas in the case of Finland. So we kind of diminished the role of the household spirit into these outbuildings on the homestead. And that was something that took place after Christianity started to take over. So nowadays, when you hear folklore from, most of this is coming from Britain and Scandinavia about household spirits, they're often, referring to them as living in these outbuildings on the farm or the homestead. They no longer fully reside in the home. This kind of parallels in some ways what happens to the Fae in Celtic paganism. If you've seen my Pagan Happy Hour episode about the Fae or one of my videos about the Fae, they were considered originally to be this powerful, magical race of beings. And then after the conversion to Christianity, the Fae slowly kind of lost power within the folklore to the point that they become associated with like pixies and other things that aren't really related to what they originally were. So, kind of a similar thing here with household spirits. They used to be very important and reside in the home, and then they slowly get pushed out, and their role diminishes more and more. So, I think that's kind of interesting that parallel there, and you'll find that in pretty much most aspects of paganism and folklore, where after the conversion, the power that these figures once had gets smaller and smaller and smaller. But great question and great points that you guys have brought up so far. So let me check your comments before moving on. Um, let's see. Lynn is saying, because I am fundamentally an animist and my home is built mostly of wood, I feel it has quite a bit of spirit. Yeah, household spirits are considered like animist deities, so that makes a lot of sense. Let's see. uh, Uhtred in the comments says, my household spirit does the laundry. I wish I could get one of those. I feel like I'm always doing laundry. Let's see. Jody has a question. She says, my house is a new build. Is there a way to attract spirits? Now, this is something interesting as well when it comes to the folklore around household spirits. Now, traditionally, if you were to move, your household spirit would follow you, because household spirits don't want to be in a empty house or be with a new family. So traditionally, they would follow the family from place to place, unless they were traveling really long distances. Um, or this is another kind of weird aspect of the folklore, but the household spirit would stay with the eldest son because that would be the one who would traditionally inherit the homestead. So if the family were to split up or people were to move out back in the day, so if the eldest son moves away from the home, the household spirit would usually traditionally follow him. But otherwise, your household spirit would potentially follow you from home to home. So potentially you already have one. If you've moved around a lot, potentially a household spirit has come along with you. It's very rare that a household spirit would stay in an empty house or want to be part of a different family, according to the folklore. Let's see. Oh, we have a super chat here from Sarah. Let me cover that before moving on. Let's see. Sarah is asking, what do you suggest for practices during the holidays with people that celebrate in a Christian and capitalistic way? These ways do not align with my agnostic spiritual approach and desire to acknowledge harm. I can't read the last part, but yeah, that's a great question and something that I'm sure many of you guys face at this time of year. So I am pretty flexible when it comes to how I celebrate the holidays. For me personally, on my own, I do celebrate Yule on the winter solstice. So that's something usually done by myself, or if I have like a pagan friend, I might invite them over. We do a little ritual, have some nice food. Um, but that doesn't mean I don't participate in other people's Christmas celebrations. Usually every year I will visit, family on either my side of the family or my husband's side of the family, and they're all celebrating a traditional, Christmas, on the 25th with presents and everything like that. And I still do that. I'm fine with that. After all, most of the Christmas traditions are in fact pagan. The gift giving is from Saturnalia. The tree in the living room is very druid like. So I have no problem celebrating Christmas with family. And when I do, I try not to do one of those, well, actually, this holiday is blah, 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 because that's probably just not being a good party guest. But yeah, most of the people do know that I'm pagan, but not all of them. And so yeah, I kind of just do my own thing for myself personally for Yule, for the solstice, but I'm totally fine going out to other people's Christmas celebrations. If they're Christian, that's fine. There's a time and a place to kind of share your beliefs with others, and Christmas is maybe not one of them when people just want to get together and have a good time. But that's my own, 2 cents. You should, of course, do whatever you feel comfortable with for the holiday season. But great question, and thank you so much for the super chat. Let's see. Let's see. A question from the G Man asking, wasn't there also a connection between household spirits and ancestors? Um, yes. So the household spirits I'm going to be talking about mostly today are not ancestral spirits, but there are also household spirits that are ancestors, like the Lares in Roman paganism that I was mentioning earlier. Or there are certain pagan cultures that very much honor the ancestors. Of course, if not just European ones, you can think of Dia de los Muertos in Mexico, or Shinto ceremonies in Japan. So there's a lot of ancestor worship throughout different pagan societies, and in some of that, those offerings are given for the ancestors in the home. But the household spirits I'm talking about today are specifically folkloric spirits coming mostly from Britain and Scandinavia that are primarily associated with Yule. Now, there are many of these household spirits in the Slavic world. They have the domovoi. Of course, in England, they have the brownie that we talked about, or the bogart. But for the most part, the ones associated with Yule specifically tend to be Scandinavian. So we're going to talk mostly about those. Now, the ones that we'll be talking about are the Nisse, which is Norwegian and Danish, the Tomten or Tomte, which is Swedish, and let's see, the Finnish Tontu. So these three different types of household spirits look pretty similar. And anytime you look up Scandinavian Christmas or Yule stuff, you'll probably see them featured in a lot of ways. Now, this tradition of celebrating these household spirits at Yule does go back to medieval times when people would carve wooden effigies of these household spirits so that they would then maybe place them on the mantle above the fireplace so that they could then leave an offering for them. But let me check your questions before we dive into specifically those three that I mentioned. Let me know if you have any other questions about household spirits in general. Let's see. Let's see. A question here. Is it okay to connect with your household spirit? And how do you know if you may or may not have one? So, yes, it's definitely okay to connect with your household spirit. And one of the things we'll be discussing is leaving a small offering for them at Yule is one of the great ways to connect with a household spirit. How do you know if you have one? If you're walking about your home and the things kind of seem a little cleaner than you had done, like if like, oh, why is that mirror clean? I feel it was like really dirty last week and I never cleaned it. That could be an example of a household spirit. So little things like that, or if you lose something and then all of a sudden the item you lost is like right on your desk as if someone had found it and placed it there, that's an example of a household spirit. I had an example like that back when I was in high school, where this is back when I was following the Wiccan tradition and I had lost my pentacle necklace and I didn't know where it was. I couldn't find it anywhere. And I eventually did find it right on my pillow as if someone had placed it there. I asked my parents if they had, and they hadn't. So I think I might have had a household spirit back then. And that was like a house that was over 100 years old. So it's very possible. Let's see. Let me check your other comments and questions. Um, Questions on how do you attract a new one? Leaving an offering for them would be a great way to attract a new one. And I'll be talking specifically about what kind of offerings to leave in a second. Let's see. Let's see. Great questions, guys. Oh, we have a super chat that from Michelle. Thank you very much. That says, "I always fill my home with tontu at Yule, a perfect way to connect with my Finnish ancestors." That's great. Awesome. Um, so especially when we're talking about the Nise, the Tomten, and the Tontu, if you do happen to be of Danish, Swedish, Finnish descent, or Norwegian descent, it's possible that there's been a household spirit that has been traveling with the family. So you might have a household spirit if you are from that descent that might have traveled, all the way through the generations. That's very possible as well. Um, let's see. Oh, and a question about aren't Tomte and Nisei gnomes? They look a lot like your quintessential garden gnomes. In fact, the Christmas elves you see portrayed in like artwork, a lot of that comes from these earlier manifestations of household deities in Scandinavia. It's definitely that look. um, Let's see. Oh my goodness, great comments. I see several of you guys talking about your household spirits are stealing your socks. Yeah, that could be the case if you've been missing a lot of socks lately. They tend to be tricky spirits, just like the Fae. Let's see. Okay, awesome. So let me see here. Now let's start with the Norwegian and the Danish Nisse. Now, this is a term, it's Nisse, if you'd like to look it up. It's most likely derived from an Old Norse phrase meaning dear little relative, which I think is just adorable, as if these little creatures are like our relatives in some way. It's super cute. Now, these ones are considered to be only as tall as like a 1-year-old. They usually wear a red cap. They have a long beard. The appearance is definitely similar to a garden gnome. You can like Google image it and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, for the Nisei, they tend to have a very particular cleaning routine that they don't like to have disrupted. The folklore states if you spy and you see your Nisei cleaning your home, they will leave the household in anger. They tend to be very quick tempered, quick to anger. Um, and they will even potentially play tricks on you or steal items or traditionally even kill livestock if you didn't treat them correctly. So, all of these household spirits tend to be quite a bit temperamental. One of the interesting things on why they are particularly connected to Yule is these household spirits, the ones that I'm talking about, would sleep through summer and only wake up at around the time of Michaelmas, which is in late September. So they would kind of wake up and start taking care of the home towards the autumn and then eventually the winter season before kind of going into hibernation again. And another kind of just cute fact that I like about the Nisei is it said that the Nisei's favorite friend is the family cat. So if you do happen to have a Norwegian or Danish household spirit, it's probably good friends with your cat. Let's see. Oh, and another thing too that's a bit of his folkloric tradition has to do with horses. So Nisei were apparently very fond of black horses or black stallions. And if you would find that your horse had a particularly beautiful sheen to it, or perhaps had the mane or tail braided without you doing it, that was a clear indication that you had a Nisei living with you in your horse stables. And in that case, the Nisei would travel with the horse. So if you were to sell the horse, that also meant your household spirit would leave you and go wherever the horse was. So they have an affinity for other animals on the farm or the homestead, especially cats and black horses, which is just kind of a neat fact I thought I'd share. Now, when it comes to offerings for the Nisei, what you're meant to do is to leave a bowl of porridge out on Christmas Eve. For those of you that were asking, how do I attract a household spirit or how do I connect to a household spirit? A small bowl of porridge left out on Christmas Eve. So this is already, you can kind of see where this much later idea of leaving like cookies for Santa comes from. Probably comes from these much older traditions of leaving porridge out for the household spirits. Let me see here. Good question here about the Yule Bach, which I'll be talking about next. Now, that's a particularly Swedish creature that also has some connections to household spirits. So we'll be talking about that next. Oh, interesting. Lynn has a book recommendation for us, and this is hilarious. So Lynn is suggesting The Old Magic of Christmas, Yuletide Traditions for the Darkest Days of the Year by Linda Radish. And oddly enough, I have this book right next to me. I used this book when doing the research for today's Pagan Happy Hour, and I've used it for researching several of my other videos. I have it linked down below in my description if you are interested in it, but this really is a great resource if you're interested in learning more about not just household spirits connected with Yule, but a lot of different Yule lore and pagan history. So yeah, that's so funny. It's very much a synchronicity that you happen to mention this book, and I have this book right next to me since I was using this for the research today. Let me see here. Checking your comments. Uhtred is mentioning household spirits don't like dogs. They hate having to pick up with them. And that is true to the folklore. Household spirits like cats and they do not like dogs. Your dog could potentially scare it away. um, let's see. Travis is asking, are there household spirits in Celtic paganism or historically in Celtic culture? Now, for Celtic pagan society, we don't know exactly because we don't have written sources, but it's possible because when we look at Celtic folklore, there are many variations of household spirits, like the Brownie that I was mentioning, or Robin Goodfellow, or the Bogart. Those are just several of the many household spirits connected to Celtic culture. So it's likely, but we don't have written sources. We only have folkloric sources to tell us. Um, so, like all aspects of Celtic culture, we don't have many primary sources. So, we don't know exactly what the Celtic pagans were doing. We just know what might have been passed through tradition. Let's see. Okay, next, let me move on a bit to the Swedish tomte or tomten, different ways to pronounce it. I apologize if I'm doing it incorrectly. I'm not the best at pronunciation, as you all know. But this is an interesting one because this has to do with gift giving. So originally, it was believed that the Yule Bach, the Yule goat, was the one that would give out the gifts during Christmas time or during Yule time. Now, the Yule Bach is a large goat, and it's most likely a reference to Thor's goat. If you are familiar with Norse paganism, you know that Thor rides a chariot pulled by two goats, which is awesome. And not even my most favorite chariot from Norse paganism. Obviously, that would be Freya's chariot that is pulled by house cats, which I think is adorable. But Thor's chariot being pulled by goats is probably the origin of the Yule Bach. I have a whole video I did all about the Yule Bach tradition in Sweden, and there is a town where they actually construct this giant goat made out of straw every year in the town square. And the teens in the town always try and burn it down. And a lot of times they are successful. So it's always a question on if the Yule Bach will get burned down this year or not. And for me personally, I've been really searching for, I want like a straw Yule goat or Yule Bach about this size or so that I can put underneath my tree for Yule. And I haven't really found a good one yet. So if you have a link, send it my way where I can buy one of those. But the Yule goat was the one that would traditionally give the gifts out during Yule. So they didn't really have a Santa Claus until recently. In Swedish culture, they had the Yule goat. And the Tomten were the ones that would travel with this Yule goat to help deliver the presents that he carried. Now, that started to change in the 1800s, where it changed more from focusing on the Yulebach to focusing on the Tomte or the Tomten, probably because people thought that the Yule goat or the Yule Bach was too heathen, and with the church they were concerned about it, and for some reason they thought like these little gnomes, elves would be less anti-church. So that's kind of what happened there. Now, the root of the word tomt, so Tomt, that refers to the packed earth that is beneath the homestead. So it refers to kind of the land that the homestead or the home sits on. So that's really where we get the word tomte. Um, Now, the tomta is in a way quite similar to the Danish and the Norwegian nisse in that it likes a bowl of porridge, but it also likes some honey to be mixed in to the porridge. So, porridge with maybe butter and honey. If you're trying to attract a Swedish tomte as opposed to a Norwegian or Danish nisse, in which case regular porridge is fine. There's a lot of porridge offerings going on when it comes to Yule folkloric traditions. Um, even something I'll be talking about later on in a video, I'll be talking about Frau Perchta. Frau Perchta is connected to the Krampus traditions, and she also requests a bowl of porridge left out at Yule time. So a lot of this porridge eating for offerings. So I guess it's pretty simple and easy to do compared to some of the other offering potentials out there. So I just thought I would share that. Let me check your comments before we move on to the Finnish version. So let me see. What do we got here? Oh, Graves is mentioning, seriously, look up the Galve goat. Yeah, so the town that I was talking about is Galve, Sweden, Galve, if you'd like to look it up. And I do have a video about the Swedish goat. Let's see. Um, Great comment. Yeah, it's so funny. I would love to go to that town one day. Definitely have to do that and do like a vlog or something. It'd be so fun. Let me see. Oh, Raven is mentioning IKEA usually has Yule Bach for the holidays. Now that is interesting. If they sell it online where I can buy it, I am definitely going to order one. One of the exciting things too for my new home is probably not this year, but next Yule, I'll probably have two trees. Right now, I just have one, but I feel like that house is big enough for two. So I'll have one tree, which I'll just do traditional with all the, various ornaments, not very aesthetic, but ornaments I've collected over the years, souvenirs and whatnot. And then I want to do a Scandinavian Yule tree, all with Yule ornaments and Yule Bach and runic ornaments and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just already bursting with ideas for next year. That'll be super fun to. Let's see, Joey's mentioning about Thor's goat and that he occasionally kills and eats his goat, but then resurrects them the next morning. Yes, the goats in these stories are magical goats and they do come back to life, and Thor does eat them regularly throughout the poetic and the prose Edda. Let's see. Oh, we have a super chat from Krishna. Thank you so much. That says Danish troll figurines were my thing as a kid in Scandinavian lore. They all have distinctive personalities. So the troll figurines that you see, in a lot of ways, they're quite similar to the tomte or the nise. They look pretty similar. They often will have the red cap, but not always. So trolls aren't necessarily tied specifically towards Yule, whereas in the nise and the tomte are. But yeah, those are really fun. I remember the first time I went to Disney World, they had a great ride in Epcot, and I think the Norway pavilion. We were on this kind of long ship, and then I remember the gift store, they would sell all of those, like, traditional troll and Nisei Tomte figurines. It was super cute. Um, let me see what else you guys have to say. Uh Ooh, Leah has an interesting comment that in Japanese folklore, the Inugami was a household spirit in the shape of a dog. That's awesome. Well, that makes sense. Inu is the word for dog, and Gami sounds like Kami, which is the word for God in Japanese. I'm a big fan of Shinto as well. I took Japanese back in college. Let's see. Oh, and the G-Man is asking, would kobolds also be household spirits? I think that's a Germanic household spirit. Correct me if I am wrong in the comments, but yes, I believe so. Um, oh, great. Oh, and then Leah is mentioning in the podcast Fair Folk, there was a whole episode about the Yule goat. I do love that podcast. So definitely check that out as well. So the last household deity I wanted to mention that's specifically tied towards Yule is the Finnish version, which is the Tontu. And the Finnish version is actually a household deity that most commonly resides in the sauna. If you're familiar at all with Finland and Finnish culture, you know that they love their saunas. And, this is something I also learned about Slavic paganism and Slavic folkloric deities as well, that they also have sauna spirits. So Finland and Russia tend to do the sauna household deities. But the Finnish Tontu, resides in the sauna because that's considered to be both the kind of like the realm of both physical and spiritual cleanliness. So instead of the hearth being the heart of the home. In Finland, it's kind of like the sauna in a lot of ways, is the heart of the home or the spiritual sacred space, which is kind of cool, right? Um, and I've read that the Finnish Tontu actually prefers a glass of brandy to be served as an offering with his porridge. So keep that in mind if you are trying to attract a Finnish Tontu. So I thought that was kind of funny. Though I think actually the Norwegian and the Danish Nisse will also accept cakes too, like little cute Danish cakes and beer. So, you have some variety, I guess, when it comes to what to leave as an offering. Oh, we have a super chat from Carl. Cheers. Thank you very much. Let me check your comments. Let's see. A recommendation here that says the YouTube channel Irish in Finland has some interesting videos about Finnish folklore and history. That sounds super fascinating. I'll have to check that out. I actually was able to go to Finland briefly. I was only there for 1 day, unfortunately. And I would have loved to spend more time there because Finland is really fascinating and so much folklore is still very much alive in their culture. So, regardless of what household deity or spirit you want to connect to, there are so much variety there and so much to be gained from trying to connect to a household spirit, in my opinion. Even if you don't necessarily literally believe in household spirit, at the bare minimum, what it does is it gives you a space to have gratitude for your home. Leaving an offering allows you to both connect to this rich history of deities that have historically been known to help us in our times of need within the home. And it also helps us, to remember to be grateful and to remember all the hard work that is required to keeping a warm and comfortable and healthy home. So I think it's really wonderful that so many different pagan cultures have their own household deities and that they played a big role in their day to day lives. And unfortunately, just like the Fae, over time and with the conversion to Christianity, they lost some of that role in the family, that role within society. But today, as modern pagans, we can help kind of restore that a little bit and bring attention again to these household spirits. One book I would recommend, and I'm actually going to be doing a book haul video next week, so keep an eye out for that. But this is the book I picked up recently, The Winter of the Witch by Katherine Arden. And this is part of a series. So this is the third book in the trilogy. The first book is The Bear and the Nightingale. So you should look up that one, The Bear and the Nightingale. Um, and I have it linked down below in my description if you're interested. But this series is about Slavic paganism and Slavic folklore and fairy tales. And the series contains quite a few Russian folkloric spirits. It's fiction, of course, but you can tell the author about 15 minutes or so. So we have a few more minutes for questions and comments and thoughts, anything that you would like to share. And of course, I'm here for all your questions and ideas. I'm going to have a sip of my drink. And if you would like to donate, now's a great time. Of course, no pressure at all. And let me take a sip. Let's see. Aaron in the comments says, I wish I had been brought up with these traditions. I feel out of the loop. Yeah, me too. It's kind of a shame that we've lost a lot of these traditions. My great grandmother came over from Denmark, but I wasn't raised with any Danish traditions, unfortunately. My grandmother was, and my mom really wasn't. So I really wasn't. And it's only now that I'm trying to relearn and re experience all of this ancient history that could have been passed down but wasn't. Something pretty common for us Americans in particular. We often lose the lore and the traditions of our previous generations. Let's see. Okay. Let me see what else you guys have. Okay, just checking your comments and your questions. J. Elizabeth is mentioning you should look into the Sami people's traditions and beliefs. Yes, the Sami are super fascinating. Now, they are a indigenous people from Siberia. Now, in last week's Pagan Happy Hour, I briefly mentioned the Sami, but there are a lot of Christmas traditions that probably derive from the Sami people. And I go over that in the Pagan Origins of Santa Claus. So, if you are interested, check out the video I have titled that linked in the description where I talk quite a bit about Siberian shamans or Sami shamans. There's a lot of really neat stuff there. And of course, they are mostly caribou farmers. So when we think about Christmas time being connected to reindeer, which is basically caribou, a lot of that kind of comes from the Sami people. Let's see. Let me see what else we got. Okay. Let me see here. Just reading through your comments. Danielle has an interesting question. She is asking, talking about household spirits, I'm a baby witch and I love British witchcraft traditions, but I live in Spain. Is it possible to invoke the spirits from British folklore from where I live? I think so. Now, of course, this is my own opinion. I am here in America, and it would probably be weird if I just worked with the spirits that are native to the land, right? Because here in America, you have the Native American gods and spirits and deities, but I myself am not Native American. So when I work with deities and spirits, I'm usually working mostly with European deities and folklore and spirits. And so, yeah, I don't live in Europe, but that tends to be the pantheons and the deities that I primarily work with. So, in my view, I think that's okay. It's not necessarily where you're located, though there are ways to use your local environment to bring more context into your spiritual practice. And I do that through the nature around me. So, understanding the local herbs and plants and trees and incorporating that specifically into my witchcraft practice, I do that very much. But I mostly work with European pagan traditions. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to follow the branch of paganism that corresponds with your ancestry. In paganism, there's not a governing body telling us what to do. You get to choose what pagan path you feel connected to and follow that path. This is just the path I choose to, but you can really pick what you like to study and the deities you would like to work with. I am not here to tell you what you should or should not do, nor is really anyone having the authority to do that. So you should always trust your gut, trust your intuition, and do what feels right. That's one of my favorite things about paganism is we have so much freedom to connect with the spirits, the deities, and the culture that we feel drawn to. Let me see. What else do we got? Um, let's see. Megan has a funny comment. She says, I saw a video where someone said they put an eye patch on their Santa every year because of Odin. That would be hilarious. I love that idea. If you had like a little Santa figurine and you put a little eye patch on him, it's hilarious. I love it. Oh, and Laura Ipsum in the comments is mentioning the full moon tonight. Yes, if you have the ability, go outside, check out that full moon, and enjoy the beauty. Let's see. Let's see what other questions you guys have. Okay. Oh, and it's also a lunar eclipse, I believe, which is pretty rare. So I don't think everywhere in the world can see the lunar eclipse. So it depends on where you're located if you'll actually be able to see the eclipse tonight. Let's see. Awesome. Oh, actually, yeah, I think the lunar eclipse specifically was last night, not tonight. Thanks for correcting me in the comments. Yeah, but the moon is still pretty full out there, so go enjoy it. um, so let me have a sip of my drink, and then we'll share some closing thoughts. Okay. Now, this, of course, is meant to be an introduction when it comes to household spirits. There is so much information out there. And if you are trying to figure out where to find more details on this, it helps to first know what region or time period or culture you are interested in. Because, as I was mentioning, pretty much all pagan cultures and societies have had household spirits of some kind. So, figuring that out first and then doing some research to learn about the household spirits of that particular pagan path can send you down such a wonderful wormhole of reading. um, and there's so much there. And I do hope if this is your first time trying to connect with a household spirit, just leave a little bit of porridge out there, maybe on the winter solstice. You know, what's the worst that could happen, right? So give it a try. Let me know how it goes. Of course, we have, several more weeks till the winter solstice, but we still have a lot of Yule content to cover. And like always, I'm definitely open to your thoughts and ideas in terms of topics. So I think that's going to end our pagan happy hour for today. Again, thank you guys so much for joining me this Friday. I have plenty of links down below. I have the link for my Patreon, my Kickstarter. I think I linked all my previous Yule videos. So if you want to go on a Yule watching spree, you can do that there. And I will see you guys next week. I'll talk to you later. Bye.